what would happen if you're the director? What would happen if you're the screenwriter? What happens to your character in the next season? If you want something, write it into your story. How do you get there? That's when we are most like the divine in our creation of our reality, that we have so much potential to create this reality for ourselves.
The protagonist in the film needs to have dilemmas. Over and over again, there needs to be a dilemma that the protagonist faces. And the harder the dilemma, the better the story. And great film reminds us of the transcendent identity, right? The resiliency of humans, and I would argue the divinity of humans as well.
You might get rejected. You might fail. And the thing that you can control is getting back up and doing it again until you get better.
Yeah.
And you won't fail in the same way. You'll get better, and you'll get better, and you'll get wiser. I think that is so empowering. Like, we can become anything.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Guiding Light. I'm Jenna Carson.
I'm Sierra Larson.
And we are so grateful you're here as we talk about inviting sources of peace into your life and following those sources of peace. And today we actually want to talk about a really cool theme, which is being the hero of our own journey and understanding the journey that each of us is going on in this life. And I think this will make more sense as we get more into this. But basically, it's about being aware of the internal changes that you're going through in life. A lot of times we can go through life and allow things to kind of happen to us and not have time to process what's happening inside. And so I want to share with you something I learned at a screenwriting class in Los Angeles at the Writers Guild. And this is going to explain the topic. So, Sierra, did that make sense? Any questions before I dive in to tell you about this?
No, I'm super excited. This sounds like something we work on in therapy, so I'm excited to hear what you learned.
Perfect. So, I got to hear from the famous screenwriter Billy Ray, and he wrote the screenplay for Hunger Games and Captain Phillips and several other films. And he is a prolific writer. He has this incredible work ethic, and he gave us this incredible lecture. And I felt like I was just sitting at the feet of a master, hearing all that he had to share about decades in the film industry writing. And he had required us to watch 9 films before we showed up for this lecture. And a lot of these films, frankly, I did not enjoy. I had to watch Silence of the Lambs, and that just traumatized me. It was really rough. So there were a lot of films that were rough for me to watch because they were violent and scary. And his whole point, though, I realized in his lecture as he tied these 9 films together, I finally understood why he had us watch them. And he told us, he said, the thing about a film is that the protagonist is the story. So a lot of times we as consumers of film, we think the story is the story. We watch Harry Potter and we think the story of all that's happening in this magical world is the film. Harry Potter is the story of Harry Potter. His character development is everything. So let me give the example of the film The Godfather. So, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the film, I am going to talk about the story, which is Michael. He is one of the sons of the Godfather, and he shows up to his sister's wedding with his girlfriend, Kay. And he is showing Kay a little bit of insight into his family and the mafia and what they're doing and the violence and kind of the not so nice things that this family does. And he said, but Kay, that's not me. That's my family. And so you watch this film, this masterpiece of cinema, and you see throughout this story that Michael claims he doesn't want to be like his family. He claims he doesn't want to be his father. And inside, subconsciously, he's dying to become his father. So the whole story of this film is Michael not only becoming the Godfather, but becoming even worse than his father. Because at the end of the film, Michael chooses his fake family. He chooses the mafia over his real family. He lies to his wife. And that's the final scene. He has lied to his wife. And the final scene is his minions in the mafia shutting the door on his wife and kissing his hand. And it's this beautiful metaphor of what can happen in our lives when we're trying to fix an external problem. So throughout the whole movie, he's trying to protect his father, protect the family, do these things, but he doesn't realize inside he is becoming an image of his father. He's becoming the Godfather. And like I said, he's becoming even worse. So my point in sharing this was I had an epiphany listening to this lecture where I realized we go through life and we think these external problems are the problem. Like, I'm going through a divorce, right? Or whatever the problem is. That's what I'm thinking about. Another example is the movie Kramer versus Kramer, which is about a father whose wife leaves him and his young son. She walks out on them, and he has to learn to be a father. And so this whole movie, you're watching Dustin Hoffman's character learn how to become a father, learn not to be such a workaholic, learn to really be there for his son. He doesn't realize through this whole film that the real story is about him becoming a father because he's trying to deal with all these external problems. So my point in sharing this is like so many times in life, we get caught up in the external problem that we don't know what is happening internally. So Michael in The Godfather didn't know that he was falling. He was doing exactly what he thought he didn't want to do. He was becoming who he didn't want to become. And then Dustin Hoffman's character, Mr. Kramer, he doesn't even realize what a good father he's becoming. And finally, at the end of the film, we can all witness, wow, he really loves his son and he makes choices that protect his son. And so I want to ask us listeners, like, what are we becoming? We're the hero of our own story. What are the external problems that are taking our time and our energy? How can we remove ourselves from them just a little bit to see the big picture, to see if we're becoming who we want to become and not getting too sucked in to the external problems that we lose sight of who we are and what our goal for our character is.
Yeah, I love that. I think that what you're saying is kind of just about intention and going through life with intention. So a lot of times we go through life with this like main character energy. And one thing that I've heard before and that I work on with clients is what would happen if you're the director? What would happen if you're the screenwriter? What happens to your character in the next season? Who did they become? What did they get out of life? What challenges do they have to overcome? And I think when we realize that we really have a lot of agency or autonomy to design our lives, it's so empowering that our life isn't just up to someone else and all of these external factors to just kind of roll with, just roll with what comes. If you want something, write it into your story. How do you get there? And I think the first way to do that is to start with your vision. Where do you want to be? Because if you don't know where you want to be, then it doesn't matter which way you go, right? So if you want to be a Hollywood screenwriter, you know, design that into your life. And what would that look like? What would that take? How do you get there? What is that journey? That mindset helps us to see life as something powerful and controllable in a way. There obviously are going to be things that you can't control in your life, but if we focus on what we can control and what we can design and what we can create, that's when we are the most powerful. That's when we are most like the divine in our creation of our reality, that we have so much potential to create this reality for ourselves. And it can be the ideal dream life that we want. So I think that's really interesting. How is what you're learning as like a screenwriter and writing and character development, how does that apply to like having a vision and developing our character, our inner character? How have you seen that or what have you learned on that?
Well, I'm just beginning this 10-month course, so I'm at the beginning, but one thing that I think about when you mention this is how Billy Ray talked about when we write the protagonist in the film needs to have dilemmas. Over and over again, there needs to be a dilemma that the protagonist faces. And the harder the dilemma, the better the story. And I think a lot of times in our lives, in my life, I'll speak for myself. I don't like to have obstacles and dilemmas. I would prefer to be told what to do. I would prefer to have a clean point from A to B, no obstacles. I just want what I want and I want it now. That's kind of how we're built to survive as humans, right? But the reality is life isn't like that. And what makes any good story a good story is that there are obstacles. And so I think the biggest thing is just for us to remember that in our real lives. Like, no matter how wonderful our dream and our ideal, the variable will be that obstacle that you weren't expecting, sometimes several obstacles. And what makes a great protagonist is that they are just doggedly showing up again and again and again. I'll go back to Harry Potter. Like, we have 7 books of Harry Potter not giving up, constantly facing his worst fears. Fears he didn't even know he would have, right? As you discover more darkness with Lord Voldemort, right? And all these different twists and turns. And so I guess just a word for us all is to recognize that there is no smooth sailing for any great protagonist. So why would we be exempt from that?
Yeah, I love that. And especially the the journey is going to have obstacles. If your journey doesn't have obstacles, you're probably standing still, right? You're probably not going anywhere because it's always going to have twists and turns like you're saying. And I think a lot of times what happens when we come up to those obstacles is we're like, "Oh, this isn't the right journey." It's like, no, part of becoming who you want to become when you get to your destination is learning how to overcome each obstacle as they show up.
Yes.
You become more capable, you become more confident, you become stronger as you face each challenge. And then when you get to where you want to be, you're the kind of person that can be in that place. I think a lot of times we want to be certain things like I want to be a millionaire. Absolutely. But in order to be a millionaire, you have to learn how to become a millionaire in the sense of think like a millionaire thinks, work like a millionaire works, speak like a millionaire speaks. Like all of these things are are a part of becoming the person that can be in those spaces, if that makes sense. Or like if you want to be an elite athlete, right? We've had amazing athletes on this show, and we they talk about becoming the person that they need to be an elite athlete, getting up and going to the gym. So all of these challenges that they have been facing, that they face are a part of becoming who they need to become on this journey to get where they want to be. So
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, and you're reminding me actually of something that Billy Ray taught me about the movie Rocky, because I think a lot of times we think that the goal is the object, and maybe it is, but what is really interesting is who we are becoming as we work toward the goal, which is what you're talking about. And what touched me so much about Rocky is and Billy Ray gave me this understanding about the movie. It A lot of people think that movie, and I'm just talking about the first one, they think the movie is about boxing. It's not about boxing. It's about a man who believes he's a loser. I'm, like, getting emotional. He believes he's a loser at the beginning of the film. And by the end of the film, he knows he's not a loser. His whole goal was just to stay in the ring with Apollo Creed, and he does for 15 rounds, and it's a love story. The last the last words in the film are "I love you." It's a love story not only with his girlfriend, but with himself, knowing he's not a loser. He deserves his girlfriend, he deserves joy, he deserves a whole happy life, and it's not about boxing. And so I think that that's like a hero's journey for all of us, is to know who we really are, you know, who we really are. And for you and I, or you and me, Sierra, we believe, we're God's beloved, right? And that all humanity, all of us are God's beloved. And so I think that that's the real journey. And reminds us, great film reminds us of the transcendent identity, right? The resiliency of humans. And I would argue the divinity of humans as well. So,
Yeah. I love that. And I love, yeah, like you're saying, had he not had those obstacles and worked towards them, he would have spent the rest of his life believing that he was a loser.
yes, yeah, he needed to fight Apollo Creed. He needed the chance to stay in the ring, right? So we all do, right? We need the chances to prove to ourselves who we really are. And sometimes it's not some big cinematic thing. It's usually the little things, like keeping our integrity, keeping our character in the face of opposition and difficulty, and standing up for others, right? Standing up for truth and right. I think personally.
Yeah, no, I totally would agree with that. One of the things, like as we talk about, hero's journey and our stories and writing our stories, is is that I think a lot of times, like you're saying, we go through the motions and apply so many external things to our stories. Well, I can't be a boxer because I'm just not good enough, or I'm so afraid of failing that I can't even try because I know I'm going to be rejected. And I think there's a lot of empowerment in saying, you might get rejected. You might fail. And the thing that you can control is getting back up and doing it again until you get better.
Yeah.
And you won't fail in the same way. You'll get better and you'll get better and you'll get wiser and you'll get stronger and you will become, the old you. We talk about this too. The old you will die off and the new you will become the person that can succeed at the thing you want to succeed, at
Right.
which you want to succeed. So I think that is so empowering. Like we can become anything, anything.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are a lot of really hard things that get in the way. And I'm not dismissing that. There are traumas, there are a lot of really hard things in life that get in the way and can cloud our ability to feel like we can do hard things. I understand that. And little by little, day by day, step by step, we're able to overcome those things and grow into somebody that we want to become. And it's about the becoming that person, your character, Rocky becoming Rocky,
Right.
this person that people run up the stairs to be like in Pittsburgh, like this iconic character. And we all have that in us to become this this winner, this absolute winner. I love that.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily beating the opponent. It's beating like it's yeah, it's knowing it's the battle. It sounds so cheesy, but the real fight is within. Because I spoiler alert, sorry if you haven't seen Rocky, maybe skip over the next like 10 seconds. But like he doesn't win, he doesn't beat Apollo Creed. It's a tie, and that's very important. That's what it is at the end of that film, because again, it wasn't about beating Apollo Creed, it was about knowing who Rocky is. And so I think something that I'm also really realistic about, and I don't mean to like burst somebody's bubble, is, we may set certain goals that we don't necessarily achieve in this life. Like that's happened for me, or I've had to change my goal because I realized maybe this isn't the best thing for me, but it was in working toward that goal that I was transformed. And yes, I achieved a lot of those goals, but sometimes our goals change form. Sometimes, dreams aren't always fulfilled. And I love the idea of manifesting all of our dreams. In my experience, it just doesn't quite work out that way all the time.
Yeah. No, I can get behind that. I think there's a difference between your dreams and purpose though. Like sometimes when you really try like find true purpose, and I say that like purpose is using your gifts and talents to serve someone else in some way. When you find a true purpose though, sometimes we think like this is my calling, this is my gift, this is my purpose, this is what I'm meant to do. And why are there so many obstacles? Why is this so hard? And knowing that it's like a deep purpose that you have makes getting over that obstacle worth it. And
Yeah.
sometimes we have these things that like yeah, it'd be cool if I did this, or we have these goals, sure. But when we find like a purpose and calling, I think that's when it's like do or die. Like we become almost relentless
Yeah.
in that. And those obstacles are like just speed bumps in reality. We'll climb any mountain for that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think understanding, is this a goal? Is this a purpose? Is this a call, or is this a calling? And knowing what you do for each, I think that kind of helps with understanding what obstacles you're willing to overcome for them.
That I think that is all we have today. I think that wraps it up well. The purpose is to me, that purpose is more important than any visible achievement. Mhm.
That's important too. Can we touch on that? Like,
Yeah.
I think a lot of times I think it's really important to know what your authentic self wants out of life.
Mhm.
Like a lot of times what we want is what we feel like we should want. Like a
Mm.
lot of times we don't really know, like we are not just sitting in the like ambiguity long enough to find that purpose or calling. And so instead of sitting in that, we just pick something because we feel like we should be doing it. Like, oh, I just need like a good job, a good career. And but we feel so unfulfilled by it. And there's nothing wrong with just getting a job and then doing something else. I'm not saying everybody has to have this like career that's so fulfilling for them. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that when you do find the thing that gives you a sense of purpose and is a calling or gives you a sense of purpose. And by calling, I mean like you feel like divinely drawn to this thing to do. That in that is is something really special, but we can't make decisions, lifelong decisions about our purpose based on what we think other people want from us or that we should be doing. I have people that I'm like working with and I talk to them and I'm like, and gently, and we have this kind of therapeutic relationship that I can say this, but you're working really hard and stressing yourself out to be validated by people that you don't like. Just like, like, we can't do like this is your life. You are the director, you are the screenwriter, you are the master of the helm right now. You cannot waste time and energy and resources to make other people happy with your life doing something that you don't even really want to be doing.
Right.
And so I think that that's really important too, is getting to know your authentic self helps you find that purpose. And once you find that purpose, then you're really willing to take that hero's journey. But that finding that purpose comes from, I believe, one, communication with the divine to find that and an alignment with the will of the divine. And there's a certain amount of surrender there that you need to do that. And two, understanding of your authentic self, what you want, what you're good at, what you're not good at, and what you want to achieve and how you want to serve and help, the things that like you see that breaks your heart. Literally, like you see that when I became a chaplain, I became a chaplain because I had a friend pass away, trigger warning. I had a friend pass away by suicide and I couldn't let that go. That became my purpose, is veteran suicide prevention, because I experienced something that I could not let go. It became a purpose, it became a calling. And it's through these life experiences, we have those for a reason. And it becomes so authentic to who we are. And as we're living that authentic self, we find our true purpose, and then we become who we need to be to fulfill those things through our journey, through the obstacles. So, yeah, I love that.
They said, Sierra. That's really important. Thank you. So I think our invitation for you who are listening, and for myself as well, is to think about purpose. And if we're doing these things we choose to do in life because we really want to, or are we thinking of what people expect of us? And let's use peace as our guide. The feelings of peace will lead us to know what the right choice is, what to keep in our lives, what to cut out of our lives. I'm going through this right now. I'm making some transitions in life, and I can see myself tempted by all the dangling carrots, all the ideas of what would be cool to do, or I don't know, the next thing, when really I've got to center myself in my purpose and what is going to bring the most peace. So an invitation to anyone who this resonates with, think about what brings peace when you think about your purpose, and go for it. And remember that you write your story. You are the protagonist and hero of your story.
So, thank you for listening today, and we hope you follow the peace.